Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. In today's episode, I wanted to bring back a very dear friend of mine and someone who every time I speak with, I learn an invaluable amount of info from. Also, based on the fact that his episodes always do very well in terms of views, he is a crowd favorite amongst all of you, and as you will hear in this episode, he brought the heat as usual. He is a doctor of medical qi-gong, an advanced CHEK practitioner, a psychedelic facilitator, and the man who I personally work with to optimize my mind, body, and spirit. My latest obsession within his massive skill set is remineralizing my body, and I am telling you guys that the work he does in this field has been an absolute game changer for me with regards to feeling highly optimized in every facet of my life. So get ready to have your minds blown open as I welcome back my man Jason Ganzu to the show. Jason, my man, amazing to have you back with me for part 4. Guys, if you haven't listened to part 1, 2, and 3, you're definitely going to go back and do that. Jason, as I said in the intro, is an amazing buddy of mine, super gifted, and I wanted to have him back on because in part 3, we talked about the idea of psychedelics and their relation to mineral content in the body, right? Now, I just did my H.T.M.A, my hair test mineral analysis, and you analyzed it. And it's not just in the context of psychedelics that this is important, right? But because we're on a psychedelic podcast, I'll obviously mention that for those of you who haven't heard part 3. But I figured today would be a great opportunity to maybe go over some of what came up in mine and what some of the symptoms maybe someone else that might be dealing with something like me but not know it might be going through, and then we can take it wherever, man. How does that sound for you?
Sounds amazing, man. Yeah, there's some pretty significant revelations in your hair tissue mineral analysis test that I'm really excited to get into. And I think it's going to be very informative for a lot of people. And I can give some different examples for individuals that may be having different symptoms that may have a different oxidation rate and type where they can still be able to relate. Beautiful.
That sounds great. And so just because someone listening to this might not have listened to part 3 yet, why don't we give a little bit of context around the H.T.M.A again? And we can keep it brief because, again, guys, if you want a deep dive, we did that in part 3. But just so if someone listens to this without listening to part 3, they're not lost. What is an H.T.M.A? Why are minerals important? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so an H.T.M.A test is using a hair sample, and it's pretty much revealing what is happening in the body at a cellular level. I don't have anything against blood and lab work. It can be very revealing. But most blood and lab work, a lot of the ranges and markers they're using are very inaccurate. And your blood is kind of like your body's good report card, as if you're copying next to a teacher's pet and you're getting all the answers, you get an A. Is that really an A that you're getting? So I've had a lot of clients that have come to me with a lot of significant issues and imbalances, symptoms. Their blood work looks like everything is A-okay. We do an H.T.M.A test, and then we can actually see really what's happening. So I like using an H.T.M.A test as being more of the unconscious revelations of what's happening, and blood work kind of being more of the conscious revelations that's happening. And as you know, the consciousness is really just the tip of the iceberg. So looking at an H.T.M.A report, there are a lot of different things you can see. I think the 2 most important things that can be revealed is 1, how much stress is the body under? Second, how is the body responding to that stress? And how significant is the deficit of energy that the body is producing? That is one of the most important things that I look for right off the bat. And then you can correlate a lot of the symptoms the individual is experiencing and has been navigating based off their H.T.M.A report.
That makes perfect sense. And, one of the things that I'll say too, because obviously we've been working together, this stuff like, guys, why this matters in the context of psychedelics as well, just to throw this little Easter egg out there is, and you can speak, I'm sure, to more to this, but I'll give like the abbreviated version. If you're connecting with plant medicines from a depleted state, At the best case scenario, you're just not getting the most out of your experiences. Worst case scenario, you're actually doing a lot more harm than good. Could you speak to that a little bit too, just to bring people up on what we talked about in part 3?
Absolutely. Well, I can really relate to what you shared, and anyone who's an athlete can. But technically, we're all athletes, but it's like going into a running race, a marathon, overtrained. You're going to go into that race. The chances of you having a good race, pretty slim. So it's like if we're going into a ceremony, have it be ayahuasca, wachuma, psilocybin, MDMA, whatever it is, if we're going into it already in a mineral depleted state, we're actually going to be causing further depletion. That's where it can be very hard for individuals to integrate the insight they have. It requires energy to integrate. It requires energy to see the insights that we've actually had and to take action on it. So we think of energy. What is the main symptom that a lot of people complain of? Brain fog and fatigue, lack of energy. Minerals are very, very responsible for creating energy. Each mineral is like an energetic being. So if we're low in one mineral, rest assured we're going to have other imbalances in the mineral kingdom. The mineral kingdom is like a spider web. You touch one area of the spider web, it affects everything. So a common mineral that a lot of people know is magnesium. Well, magnesium is responsible for about 40 to 42% of all metabolic processes. So going into medicine in a depleted state with magnesium, rest assured you're going to be causing more harm than good. You may have spiritual insight, but you're going to be spending a significant amount of energy in which you don't have trying to integrate. Now, don't get me wrong. People go into medicine in a depleted state. I would say 90 to 95%, if not even more, are doing medicine already depleted. And they're having still a lot of healing. But who's to say you can't even have more healing? It's like being an athlete. Just because you set a record doesn't mean you're just going to give up and stop training. You're still going to train to try to get even faster. So it's seeing that we actually have pure potential, unlimited potential to heal. And we can work with minerals, remineralizing and integrating medicine, and actually those two together, which is really just two sides of the same coin, we can experience a significant more amount of healing. And I've experienced that myself. I've had clients. I don't work with anyone on medicine unless they're willing to really do the work with minerals and also address other underlying infections, have it be mold, Lyme, Epstein-Barr, different autoimmune responses, parasites, fungus, yeast, candida, and a lot of these other things that have a significant impact on the mineral kingdom. So everything is really important to understand that it's a multifaceted approach. Medicine is just one of the facets.
That makes so much sense. And the thing is, guys, right, for those listening, if you're like me and you're like Jason, you're really pumped and excited about being highly optimized, right? Like that's why I made this name, right? Because we're passionate about seeing like how fast can we tune our Ferrari? You know, it's kind of the dichotomy between a lot of people just want to drive a Honda Accord. They just need to get to point A to point B, and that's okay. But I imagine if you're listening to this show, you treat yourself like a Ferrari, right? But the challenge is, let's say there's an aspect of the Ferrari that you've really never understood that is at the basis of everything. Like, I'm going to show how illiterate I am with cars, but let's just say that it's like the turbocharger, let's say, right? So that part makes the car go a lot faster. But let's say that you've never noticed that. And so you've been really good at fine-tuning the engine, aka taking the supplements that you think you should take, meditating, doing breath work, becoming conscious in how you connect with plant medicines, right? Not just doing them to party and things like that. But you're missing out on this gigantic component that if you get that in check, naturally will lead into all of these other parts being able to harmonize and you being able to work a lot less at being able to keep them optimized and also spend a lot less too, because let's face it, right? And I'm sure you can speak to this too, Jason, like there is no shortage of amazing supplements that could help someone. There's also a lot of jargon out there, but you know, again, it's like, even if you understand the world of supplements, even if you understand about hormones, things like that, to me and how you've explained it and what I've felt intuitively in doing this work, the minerals are really at the basis of everything. And so people ask, should I take magnesium? And it's like, I don't really know, because like you were saying, when we were having our private session, which we're going to get into some of these results, anything in excess can be poison. right? So even water, right? It takes water to be alive. But if you chug 2 gallons in an hour and try to do that, you will drown, right? So thy medicine can also be thy poison. And so it's important to understand that if you're like me, you've thrown a metric fuck ton of money at yourself trying to make sure that you're healthy. But at the end of the day, if you're only attacking symptoms all the time and you're never getting down to the root cause, or as you talk about it, the root cause of the root cause, then at best, you're just going to feel very disempowered that you have to spend all this money to feel what you think is good while simultaneously never really knowing how fucking good you can feel. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned from you is that, and I imagine many people resonate with this. I'm sure that people listening have had the thought of like, I know I can feel better than this, but you don't know where to turn. I'm telling you guys, I've tried a lot of stuff. This is the thing that has changed my life more than anything. And I haven't even started the supplement protocol yet. Just the information you gave me allowed me to be like, holy fuck, dude, I'm not going crazy. I did know these things were off. And when you're into health so much, you have this story of like, I should feel better, but no, maybe this is actually how good I could feel because I'm doing all of this stuff. But deep down, I always knew there was something I was missing. And so I'm just really excited to get into this, man, because it is fucking epic. Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
Yeah, and there are a lot of miraculous healings that happen with medicine use, definitely, where you can go on an Aya journey and have, energetic beings that surgically operate on you. But I think one of the most important things that we all learn in medicine is to have acceptance for what has happened in the past and what has happened in past lives that is affecting us in this life. Well, as one example, if you have what is called a calcium shell, where you're having high levels of tissue calcium, which is pretty much a defense mechanism to prevent you from further hurt and pain, I don't care how much medicine you do, it's not going to knock down and change that calcium shell that you have. So remineralization is essential when it comes to acceptance, because all of our minerals are operating like on an orchestra and like a piano board. And it's very responsible for our mental and emotional state. So when it comes to acceptance, if we're having these significant imbalances in the mineral kingdom and other imbalances and other underlying infections, it's going to be extremely hard for us to really have acceptance. We may have acceptance at one level, but do we really have acceptance at the deep core level that we really need to be having that acceptance on? And it's like we're going into medicine because normally we feel like we're stuck in the mud. Well, doing the medicine, we can have awareness on why we're stuck in the mud. But if we're low in minerals, how are we going to get out of the mud? We need to be able to have energy to get out of the mud. So at times, sometimes just doing remineralization actually will have somebody second question and second guess, do I really need to be doing medicine work? Because a lot of the reasons on why we want to do medicine is simply a reflection in a mirror of what's happening in the mineral kingdom.
That makes so much sense. And, I know I resonate with this, and I know that probably a lot of people listening to this do. For a long time, I went from ceremony to ceremony to ceremony, but I had a really challenging time integrating. And so I like the mud analogy because it was like I started noticing like, oh yeah, I'm stuck in mud. Oh, I'm really stuck in mud. Oh shit, mud is everywhere. And so it was actually just hurting me because I didn't know how to get out of it. And so I kept knowing and realizing how much fucking mud I was in. But when you feel disempowered to be able to get out of that mud and you're working with coaches, you're, sleeping 8 hours, you're doing all the things you think you should be doing, but yet you can't seem to get out of the mud, it starts to really create a diminishing return and also your ability to access confidence and these kind of things as well. And over time, it leads to a very disempowered state, as it did for me. And I remember that being able to even just get myself a little bit out of that mud allowed me to realize like, oh, I already have the awareness I'm stuck in mud. I don't need to keep going to create awareness, because awareness is the first step and it's very important, but it's not the entire equation, and it's not the entire process of the steps that are required to get yourself from point A of being disempowered to point Z of being empowered, And so I think being able to understand that while medicine is fantastic to gain awareness, I say it all the time with cannabis, it will show you the what, but it's up to you to figure out the how. But there are times and states of being with regards to minerals that you might even know how to do the how, but you can't actually execute on it. And so over time, it starts really leading to disempowering belief systems. It starts leading to unconscious disempowering stories. And before you know it, you're in analysis paralysis and you've worked yourself into a really interesting, weird corner as a result of maybe thinking the problem is, oh my God, I just suck at integrating, when in reality, it's like, no, you're trying to paddle upstream. And so when you're trying to paddle upstream, you're going to use a lot more energy. So maybe you can do it for a little while, right? Like, maybe your minerals aren't all like so depleted, or maybe you just have a lot of grit and tenacity and you can paddle upstream. But if your entire life feels like paddling upstream, there's only so long before eventually you fatigue and you start going downstream. And then all of the, the space and the length that you've gained is going to be lost, and you're right back to point zero.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think right now would be a good segue to kind of do a little bit of revelation with your H.T.M.A report. And it can be hard for people to follow along because they don't necessarily have the report in front of them. So I'll do what I can to make the most sense of it. Well, to simplify things, there are two categories that people will have on an H.T.M.A report. They'll either be a slow oxidizer or a fast oxidizer. Slow oxidizers are people that have been going at 1,000 miles per hour and their car pretty much finally shut down. They pretty much had to put their foot on the brake and they're stuck. A lot of fatigue, a lot of brain fog, and they don't have the energy to be doing the things they want to do. They'll commonly be introverts, and they'll have hypothyroidism and adrenal insufficiency, where they have actually underactivity of the adrenal glands. Fast oxidizers are people that are going at 1,000 miles per hour and they feel like they can just continue. They'll commonly have hyperthyroidism and excessive adrenal activity. They'll commonly be more of an extrovert, anxiety. Now, in slow oxidizers, will commonly be depressed. And anxiety and depression kind of go hand in hand, two sides of the same coin. So it's important to kind of take that with a grain of salt, because fast oxidizers can have certain slow oxidizer symptoms, vice versa. Now, you, my friend, are a fast oxidizer. So I think you would be able to relate to that because you're going. You're doing a lot. You're expending a lot of mental energy by doing your podcast, and you're on it. You're really on it. And I have to say, you have a pretty amazing constitution. You have a very strong one. Because I'd say a lot of other people that do what you do would feel like they're having a lot of things that are holding them back. So looking at your report, first thing that I look at are the first 4 essential electrolytes and minerals: calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. With the fast oxidizer, you'll commonly see low calcium, low magnesium. You'll see higher levels of sodium and potassium, which is associated with the adrenal glands. Calcium and magnesium act as calming and buffering minerals. That's why some people, when they take calcium or magnesium, we'll use magnesium in this example, they feel worse. Because that would be a situation where they either need a very small amount of magnesium, a low dose, or they actually really don't need much magnesium at that time. So it's very calming. So if I have somebody that's in a really fast oxidizer state, giving them a lot of magnesium would actually probably be good in certain situations because it can slow them down. Somebody that's in a slow oxidizer state, giving them a lot of magnesium may not be the best thing to do. And I know that there's some people out there that may disagree, but I've done this many, many times. I've experimented with myself, and I got big into the magnesium thing, and I started supplementing with a lot of magnesium, and it ended up doing more harm than good. So you really have to know on how to fine tune different doses and different minerals that are really applicable for each individual. But the biggest thing to see is fast oxidizer going at 1,000 miles per hour feeling like you can continue going, but it's only a matter of time that you're going to have to put your foot on the brake, and you may even have to put the parking brake on where you stop. Slow oxidizers are already in that place where they have the foot on the brake and they can't move forward. Another analogy to give is for certain fast oxidizers, it's like they're stuck in the mud and they're spinning their wheels and they don't know why they're not getting anywhere.
When I heard you tell me that for the first time, I mean, guys, like this is what I was talking about when I said, even though I just got all my supplements and I'm about to start, the information was extremely handy because I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And, I can definitely grin and bear it and push through, but I've been noticing some things recently, right? Like, as I've started to naturally slow down a little bit this year, first of all, I had the awareness before I had chatted with you that this year is my year of efficiency, that I had a story running for my entire life that I did not have good work ethic. And why was that? It was because when I was growing up in school and around my parents and everything like that, it wasn't like anyone was an asshole to me and tried to do this, but I was watching typical generator and manifesting generator energy, right? If you're looking at human design. And I am a projector. So I am here to make life more efficient, to say, hey guys, why are you doing it like that? We could just do it like this. But what do we hear? Don't cut corners. Don't take the easy way out, right? So because I naturally was inclined to do that, I then found this belief system that I had to go super fast. So the last 4 years of being in business, this year I really had some space to look back and go, okay, I proved to myself that I can work hard. But in doing so, I wasted a lot of valuable energy. And it's all divine. Like I don't regret anything. But if I kept going at that pace and being very inefficient with what I was doing, I could quickly see how that would not allow me to lead to any state of joy or be able to really help people in the way I want to help people. So I randomly had this insight during a cannabis ceremony about 2 months ago. And I realized that this year, 2023, is my year of efficiency. This is where I'm going to really step into my ability to be a projector and start looking at everything I'm doing in business and my entire life, because business is just a microcosm of the macrocosm of my life, and be able to actually ask myself, where am I wasting energy, not prioritizing correctly, not being an essentialist, and these kind of things, right? So when you told me that, I was like, that's exactly what I've been feeling. And what did you also say about fast oxidizes? You feel like you can go forever. So that is how I felt. And I still like, yeah, I can push it, but I'm now aware like, hey, I like having that button and knowing that, yes, I can push it. But just like even in a Ferrari, right? The world's best cars, you can't hold that thing a wide open throttle constantly. It needs a lot of attentive care. You can't drive it like a daily driver. It requires you to have a lot more sophisticated care to it, And so just that alone illuminated for me like, oh, yes. And so what did that also tell me? That voice that's telling me that inside of me, that is my intuition, right? My intuition was telling me, hey, it's all good. But just the same as my parents used to do. When I was a kid, I would want to stay up really late. My mom's a night owl. My dad wasn't, but my mom was a night owl, and I always kind of just sided with her. So there'd be a certain point around 8 p.m. where my dad would go, ooh, your cheeks are getting red. And I would immediately get really mad because I'd be like, no, I'm not tired, right? He knew that even though I felt like I could go forever, he knew like, listen, if you don't go to bed now, you're going to burn tomorrow's energy. That is a pattern I've been running my entire life because I convinced myself that the way everyone else works, which if you look at society, it's pretty easy to say we're out of balance anyway. But I convinced myself that doing that was the right thing to do. And so just that information alone was like, oh, such a fucking magnificent realization. And also with the magnesium thing, I had been called to connect with a lot of magnesium, right? Like I love magnesium. It helps me sleep amazing. I'm doing the 3 and 8. I'm doing the magnesium breakthrough. And so you were mentioning like fast oxidizers work well with, higher doses of magnesium on average. That was another like, oh, okay. So there is this connection to my intuition I felt, but yet there's a bigger part of me that now it's starting to teeter-totter the other way that was just like, go forward, conquer the world. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but when it's the only button you have, how long can that last, So that was very interesting.
Yeah, and you actually brought up a really important thing is, with minerals, they're all in relationship with each other. Everything is about balance and polarity. So it's like calcium and magnesium have a very intimate relationship with each other. And that's why you, my friend, I put you on a phenomenal formula that has a really awesome blend of calcium, magnesium, and boron. So you're not going to be throwing off the teeter-totter, because if you were just a supplement with magnesium, you're going to be throwing off the calcium to magnesium ratio. So in certain situations like yours, you need to have balance. You need to have the right amount of calcium, the right amount of magnesium, and then also incorporating boron into that as well. So that combination together will provide you with exactly what you need without creating further imbalances. That's why when you're just doing magnesium, doing a high dose of magnesium, it's actually going to be creating further imbalances. So everything is about relationship, and everything is about the balance of all the relationships that you have. It's like you can think you're enlightened and you can think you're God when you're just living with yourself in the hermit. I've been there, done that. Until you get in relationship and you actually have a mirror to really see what God is, that's when you realize if you're enlightened or you're not. That's when the relationship of minerals come in play. You have that reflection, you have that mirror. So the first graph is the nutritional elements. That's pretty much showing how the minerals are in relationship with themselves as an individual. And then on the second page, you have the significant ratios. That's one of the most important graphs to look at because that's showing the relationship that the minerals have with each other. And the fascinating thing is there are different ratios that have different expressions. So the first ratio is the oxidation ratio. Second ratio is pretty much the energy potential and vitality immune system ratio. Then you have the thyroid ratio. Then you have the zinc to copper ratio, which is testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen. Feminine and masculine. How is the feminine dancing with the masculine, and how is the masculine dancing with the feminine? Then you have the adrenal ratio, and then you have the blood sugar / addiction ratio. So the way calcium and magnesium are interacting and communicating with each other is very responsible for managing and regulating your blood sugar. And all addiction is blood sugar imbalances. Now, I'm not saying just supplementing with calcium and magnesium is going to just solve that, blood sugar issue, but it's one very important essential thing that has to be looked at and has to be factored in when it comes to optimizing your blood sugar / addiction.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the analogy that came to me is, for instance, like if you're hungry, you can buy food, but buying food does not equate to being less hungry. You have to eat the food in order for you to be less hungry, right? So it's almost like with, let's say, addiction. It's not like supplementing with these things and poof, you're just not addicted to heroin anymore. But it means that it gives you the space to be able to do the work necessary to get your addiction back into a healthy state, right? And not be addicted anymore. And so that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and you can look at all the ratios and you can see imbalances in all of them. And it's not that you have imbalances in all of them, but it's important to understand that you don't have to correct them all. If you really understand how to look at an H.T.M.A report, and the report itself is only as good as the practitioner that is analyzing it and evaluating it. Because there are a couple ratios that if you really know how to address and balance, the other ratios will come back into harmony and come back into balance, And since we had some deep discussion about some other symptoms and exposure to mold in the past, may even have exposure to mold now, I also factor that into your protocol because it's important to understand that if there is a mold issue, that itself is going to have a significant impact on the mineral kingdom. But in a lot of situations, you can't just get into doing these intensive protocols with addressing mold, Lyme, Epstein, parasites, fungus. Everybody's wanting to do all these parasite and fungal cleanses without understanding that the body probably is in a very, very depleted and stressed state. Well, doing some of these cleanses, at least most of them actually, causes more stress. So you have to support the adrenal glands, which is actually a backup mechanism for the heart. So you have to give the body support. You have to create somewhat of a strong foundation before really getting involved in a lot of these cleanses, unless you're going to have a reinfection. And that's one thing that I've been having a lot of is clients come to me showing me all these lists of all these antifungal and antimicrobial herbs that they've taken, and yet they still have the same symptoms. They got better for a few months, but they have the same symptoms, which is why they came to me. Well, I asked you, did you do any sort of adrenal support or any sort of support for the adrenal glands, thyroid, and heart? No. Well, you're probably in a very stressed state. And when you're doing these cleanses, you're going to be actually creating more stress. So you have to factor in that with the mineral kingdom, giving the individual the support they need from a mineral perspective allows them to effectively address what it is that they actually are going to need to address. Because you do have to address parasite infections. You do have to address mold issues if that is an issue for you. But in most situations, that may not be the best place to start right off the bat. And if you really know how to create the correct remineralization protocol, people can go from feeling at a 2 to a 3 to feeling at a 6 to a 7. And even though they may say they feel like at a 6 or a 7 on a 10 scale, you address really the deep stuff like mold issues or other viral issues. It's like they didn't even know how good they can feel. I had a client that came to me and said, I feel great, but I'm just fascinated with your work and I'd love to learn more. I said, this is going to be fun. Well, after 3 months, she was blown away. Blown away. She said, I had no idea I had brain fog. I just felt this dark cloud lift from my brain and my head. And it's like, I feel like I'm lit up like a Christmas tree. And I'm like, there you go. We get so used to how we're feeling that we don't even question, can we feel better? And when we ask ourselves that question, really wholeheartedly, we can always feel better. Just like we can always love more fully, we can always love with more intention and more compassion and empathy. Well, we can always feel better. And that's why I love doing qi-gong and tai chi, because the amount of energy you can cultivate is infinite. Infinite. Just because I feel like I can run 1,000 miles, which even if I feel like I can, I'm not going to, I harness and I root that energy and I'm present with it. But you can even have more. And that's a fascinating thing about life is there's always more. But not coming from a place of seeking it and desiring it, but being present in it, being present in life. As Krishnamurti says, when you're present, you have all the energy you need because you're synchronized with the divine. The divine is not separate from you. When we say connect to source, what we're really saying is connect to yourself. Capital S, capital E, capital L, capital F. Self as in all, wholeness, oneness. And I think that's the beauty of life, is acquiring that, embodying that. And that's been the learning for me over the last year, is taking everything I've learned intellectually, but actually embodying it and taking a step back from teaching certain things, being honest with myself that, you know what, Jason, I haven't embodied it, so I'm not going to teach it. I'm not going to speak it. And if I speak it, I'm going to speak it from a place as one, I don't know it in my heart yet. I know it intellectually and I'm still learning it. But it's changed my practice in the clients I work with being more and more honest with myself and only teaching things that I have embodied and not just intellectually understood. That's actually been the healing for me because I created a gap. Inwardly, I feel a certain way, but outwardly, I'm creating a different story. And actually, that itself can create disease. That itself can create a whole lot of pain. Inwardly, I don't feel safe. Outwardly, I'm like, look at my fancy car and look at my big house. Inwardly, I feel like I am not smart enough. Outwardly, I'm like, I know it all. And that's why no matter if I feel like I've specialized in something, I still remain a student in it because I'm always learning to do things differently. I'm always adapting and modifying things. I'm always experimenting. And it's like, just because I found one way or multiple ways to create a phenomenal protocol, which I've been fascinating with because I love it, doesn't mean I'm going to stop there. I'm still going to learn. I still love learning different ways of going about things, experimenting with different supplements, different brands of supplements, because it's endless. And I think that's the beauty of being a holistic health practitioner is remaining a student.
Yes, 100%, man. I mean, dude, you said so much beautiful stuff in there. And this is, to me, how I describe this is the difference between knowing something, like intellectually, and realizing it, aka making it real for the I in the equation, right? So, for instance, like I knew that I could feel better, but I had not really embodied the ability to feel better yet. So I knew, yes, I should feel better. I was shitting on myself. But until I actually believed that I could feel better, and then embodied that, there was not an ability to actually feel better, right? And it's kind of like how, when we are trying something new, we want to teach from that place of learning something. But it's important to come forward with vulnerability. And this is like one of the reasons that I believe vulnerability is so strong, because in that, now you're not lying to yourself, right? You're saying, hey, I'm not sure if this is the answer, but this is what I know now. And that allows someone else to go, wow, that's really amazing. Let me see if I can figure out part of this too. And what are we? We're all reflections of one another, right? We're all not just a drop in the ocean, but the ocean within a drop, like Rumi said. And so being able to understand that we're all walking each other home, like Ram Dass says, and all of these things, what is the reason, right? And I've definitely been here, that we feel like we need to have it all figured out. With cannabis, I say all the time, guys, I have no idea if this is 100% objectively right, because there is no objective universe. And that's why I'll never tell anyone you're definitely addicted to cannabis or you definitely need to take a break from cannabis. I invite them and pull them in with questions that allow them hopefully to use discernment in discovering whether or not what I'm saying truly resonates with them. So I always have someone on my Instagram that when I put up, hey, whatever you can't take 3 days off of owns you. Someone always comes in and goes, that's totally not true for me. I go, cool, then move on with it, right? I never said you had to agree with me. I'm here specifically to state things so that people that resonate with it can go, hey, yeah, that actually does resonate with me, because maybe it wouldn't have resonated with them yesterday. I know for a long time, I felt like it was completely okay to interact with cannabis once per day. And I had all these reasons why. And then at a certain point, I realized that was not okay for me. And yet I did not make the change. And so I knew it, but I had yet to embody it. And so luckily at that point, I was not teaching this stuff. At this point, now I'm at a place where I go, hey guys, I found that for me, a healthy relationship with cannabis looks like not everyday use. Typically, it's Monday through Friday, no cannabis, weekends, cannabis. But I'm also not so addicted to that structure, because that would just be another addiction in and of itself too, right? If I'm always interacting on weekends, then I'm leaving the intuitive feminine side of it out of it. And I'm only supplying the masculine structure side. And really the feminine and masculine are supposed to dance together, right? I was just talking about this with a client I was on before you. And we were talking about the tree of life, right? And how the tree of life, the top sphere, the top Sephiroth is Kether, aka the all, aka the center point field, right? As biogeometry talks about it, BG3. Then from there, there's the first dichotomy between Chokmah and Bina. And so you have the pillar of severity on the right-hand side, the masculine pillar. You have the pillar of mercy on the left-hand pillar, which is the pillar of feminine energy. But ideally, the goal is to get into the pillar of equilibrium, which is where Christ consciousness lives, which is where all of these beautiful states of unity exist, right? So the idea is, just like Taoism talks about, the middle way. And so it's very similar with minerals, right? Like you can't just supplement calcium. You have to make sure it's in relationship to magnesium, right? You can't just supplement these different things because, again, there could be things you're not looking at. And if you go into it with a very masculine point of view, like, again, like part of the reason that I'm so glad that you exist, along with all the other reasons, is because I knew full well that when I looked at that chart, all I was looking at it was in a very logical way. Oh, this is low. Oh, I have high lead content. Cool. So what that part of me tells me is just lower your lead content. But then you will be able to supply the questions of, well, why is the lead high, right? Is it just that you randomly have lead and you just got to detox or chelate things out of your body? Or is it because of this other thing? And I think that's the beauty of what, to bring it back to psychedelics, what these can open up, especially for someone who's never had the experience of being anything but logical, anything but just seeing the 4% of visible reality we can see, while not realizing that 96% of what's there is omitted, is you're able to then see, oh, there's this other side. But just like with anything, just like we're talking about with minerals, the idea is not to go from ceremony to ceremony to ceremony and live there. The idea is to gain insights from that realm and then integrate them into your physical incarnation so you can have a higher quality of life overall. And so, dude, I mean, you're speaking my language, man. This is one of the millions of reasons I love talking to you so much, because these conversations are always just so beautiful and I learn so much from them. And, you know, guys, like me and Jason have already talked about this report, and I'm learning more now, right, as we're going into it, because there's always like, I had a different perspective that day, right? I'm a different person every single day. And so now that I'm hearing these things again and we're having this conversation, there's new ways of relating to these things that are popping up. And so it's almost like the side quests never end. And they really never end anywhere. And this is why I think the quote exists: wise is the man who knows he does not know. Because do I really ever know anything? No, I can believe it. I can know it for me subjectively, but to think I know it objectively is naive. And so it's very interesting to bring this up.
Yeah, definitely. And, there's many different avenues we can go down. One thing that I've been the most fascinated with studying lately, and that's the thing. Sometimes I like isolating things and just studying the hell out of it, and then I'll integrate it with everything else. So recently I've been isolating the bladder organ and just studying the hell out of the bladder, and it seems like such an essential organ. I mean, as every organ is, but seeing that we don't give much of an emphasis and credit to the bladder. Well, on the 4-element system or the 5-element system, water, which is the bladder is associated with the water element, is between wood and the metal element. Metal being lungs and large intestine, wood being liver and gallbladder. Therefore, if there's any issue in the bladder, liver, gallbladder, and the lungs and large intestine will not function effectively and properly, no matter what you do. So the bladder is pretty much in control of that, which is associated with the water element. Here's a fascinating thing. All unresolved trauma gets stored in the bladder. Here's another fascinating thing. The bladder meridian is the longest meridian in your entire body. What does that mean? Every other organ feeds off of the bladder meridian. So working the bladder, healing the bladder, giving the bladder what it needs, psychologically and physiologically, does someone a lot of good. So that's another fascinating thing when it comes to looking at this. You know, there's a really cool sequence when it comes to really getting someone healthy. And I love starting with minerals, creating a foundation. And there are a lot of situations to where sometimes I'll do minerals in conjunction with other things like antifungals, antimicrobials, and address other things that can be related to viral infections, mold, etc., and simultaneously do them. And that's kind of what we're working on together, you and I. And then from there, starting to support methylation, starting to support other things that need attention like the bladder, and then starting to get it into supporting the hormones. Now, here's another pretty fascinating thing. What creates healthy hormones? Healthy blood. You can't have healthy hormones unless you have healthy blood. So if there is an underlying gut infection, you're not going to be having healthy blood. Anemia. Well, parasites feed off of iron, you know, so that's why a lot of people have anemia, because there's an underlying gut infection, parasites, fungus, etc. So being a hormonal specialist, if you are and you don't understand all these other key facets that have to be integrated first, in my opinion, you're kind of pissing in the wind. You're just hoping that someone's going to feel bad, or you're giving them, you know, hormonal replacement therapy, and that may be making them feel good short term, but you're creating a lot of other imbalances too. You know, so with our work together, this is just a beginning. Just like I told you, like really, this is just the beginning, and we're in this journey together. And that's what I tell my clients, like, this is really just the beginning of the journey. I'm not just going to create you one protocol and be like, here you go, you're going to get better. No, like, this is an introduction. You're going to feel definitely better, but there are other processes and sequences that we have to go through in order for us to seal the deal. And when we seal the deal, you'll know a lot of the stuff that I do with my clients too. So I inform and give the why. I don't just say, do this, I explain the why. The more you understand on how to do a deadlift, the better you're probably going to do a deadlift. The more you understand why it's important to eat organic, the more chances of you eating organic. So understanding the why is critical, very essential. So I just wanted to highlight that, because anemia is just a symptom. And if you just supplement with iron, you're going to be actually probably creating the symptom to get a lot worse. You may feel better short term, but you have to ask why. It's like when you're doing coaching, you continue to ask why until you break the person and they get to their core, they get to the heart. Same goes for medicine, you know, and I've been even more fascinated with seeing what we call root causes and questioning, is this really the root cause? And seeing that there actually is an underlying root cause that is creating these so-called root causes. And I myself have been through hell of a freaking journey over the last 16, 18 years. My dad and I spending over $350,000 on doing all these wild things: stem cell therapy, NAD therapy, ketamine therapy, TMS therapy, all these just wild interventions and stuff, and working with the best so-called specialists, not really getting anywhere. And then here I am landing at an area where I'm like, wow, this was the missing piece of the puzzle. There's a significant correlation with mold and Lyme for me. Well, why wasn't I told this at the beginning? Why wasn't I told this within the first few years of me being really, really sick? I mean, I was 6'1" and I weighed 118 pounds. I was extremely malnourished, and I looked very, very sick too. Well, I had to go through learning all these things that acted as like a ladder and a stair set up to really what is the pinnacle of everything, really what is the root cause. Because if you just are a specialist in mold and don't understand everything else, well, you're going to be very limited. If you're just a specialist in minerals and you don't understand everything else, you're going to be very limited. If you're just a specialist in hormones, you're going to be very limited if you don't ever understand everything else. So it's phenomenal to actually see the reflection and find meaning in it instead of looking like, gosh, we wasted all that money and I never got well, really. I mean, don't get me wrong, I got a little better, but I really think the reason why I got better is because I've been able to have acceptance and find meaning in what I'm going through and change instead of waking up in the morning and saying, I feel like shit and I'm fatigued and I have brain fog, rewording and saying, my body and my brain is teaching me new ways to heal and teaching me new ways how to effectively be honest with myself, how to listen to my body. There we go. Change the energy, change the information. But now I've been at a point where I'm like, wow, this is incredible. I'm happy I went through all these years feeling like I've been lied to, but I wouldn't say I've been lied to. I was just being told what they know. And that was very limited because you go see a specialist, you have to understand, most likely they specialize just in that one thing. And if they just specialize in that one thing, you can be a back pain specialist, but you may have no idea that the back is connected with the core. You may have no idea that you can go see a shoulder specialist without understanding that most shoulder pain actually comes from a dysfunction in the opposite side in the big toe. Who would have guessed that? So there's always these fascinating correlations that learning, studying, implementing, embodying, you learn it yourself. Where you can look at the person that's in front of you, have them be a mirror for you, connect with them, relate with them. The relating part is very important. There's that saying, nobody cares what you know until they know you care. So at the end of the day, the pain we go through, the suffering we go through, the hurt we go through when we're sick, it teaches us how to care, first of all, for ourselves. And then once we've acquired that, then we can actually be present with ourselves and care for the person or the people that are right in front of us. Because it doesn't matter what you learn in manuals, books, and all that other stuff, all that information. If you don't care, nobody's going to really care to listen to you. And the thing is, you can't go to a workshop and learn how to care. You can't go to, a university and have them teach you how to care. It's our pain, which is beautiful, and it's finding meaning in our pain that teaches us how to care. Life itself is one of the most greatest certifications in the world.
I love that, man. I mean, dude, first of all, I've been having right shoulder pain and my left big toe is fucking fucked up. So that is like, I was like, holy shit, guys, this is happening in real time, right? You're seeing this happen, okay? It was funny. I used to have a lot of interesting things going on with my glutes or my right glute. And I went to my friend Leah and she helped me get my left foot better. And since then, my lower back has been fire, and I bet it can even feel better, right? So, I'm always aware of that because I know it's not perfect by any means, but I'm like, okay, there's no pain anymore. There's no tension, but I know I'm missing a little bit of range of motion there, and it's kind of like the idea of if you have a tire on your car that keeps wearing down, one of your front tires, and you go to someone who's a tire specialist, they're going to be like, oh, you need a new tire. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. So you get a new tire. And then like 3 months later, you're like, dude, tire's all fucked up again. What the hell? He's supposed to last like 5 years. So you go back and he's like, nah, yeah, you need a new tire again. How many times does it take before you start going, wait a minute, I shouldn't need a tire this often, right? And so then maybe you go to someone who's like a straight up mechanic and they go, oh, your alignment's off. That's why your tires are wearing down so much. And you're like, oh yeah, I was noticing this thing where my wheel was like unable to go straight too. But you might not have noticed that symptom until you went to the guy who told you the context and you're like, oh my God, that was happening too. But because you're not someone who necessarily was a mechanic, you didn't equate the steering wheel with while the tire was going down, right? So it's really important to understand that in the context. And, again, like I was on a discovery call with a guy the other day who I could just tell was going through stuff that I used to go through, right? He had a lot of physical pain, but as we started talking, there was almost no emphasis on the physical pain, and he was talking all about his emotions. So I didn't even ask him where his pain was in his body or what he was feeling. And then I started telling him, like, listen, man, if you're like me, you grew up with a lot of neck tension, you grew up with a lot of headaches, you grew up with lower back tension. And after I go through this story and I was like, listen, and this is what it was for me, he's like, oh my God, dude, you just described me to a T. He's like, I've been to all the chiros, massage, acupuncturists, all these different doctors that again, might be great at what they do as a specialist, but it's hard to find someone who's an overall specialist, right? It's very similar to how with cannabis right now, everyone is obsessed with, oh, there's THCV, there's Delta 8 THC, there's Delta 9. And it's like, yeah, but did you realize that full spectrum is how the plant was supposed to be connected with? And so if you really want the full healing benefit, it really like benefits to be able to look at the full spectrum of what is in that plant rather than saying, oh, look at how amazing it is that we can isolate cannabinoids and look at them under microscopes. Yeah, super cool if you want to isolate things, but not the best if you're looking for the full healing capabilities of cannabis, right? So when we look at this in the context of what we're talking about right here, it's like, yes, at the end of the day, you can go to a hormone specialist or you can go to any of these individuals and they're doing the best with the information they can. But at the end of the day, they're not going to have the full picture of something. And ideally, healing is meant to be a co-creative journey, right? I caught myself in this pattern for a long time of, oh, let me go to this person and let them fix me. They're not going to fix you, man. If anything, it's just like psychedelics, right? Psychedelics don't fix you. They illuminate the how of, or they illuminate the what of what is going on, right? In the best case scenarios. But it's up to us to then balance out, right? Just like the masculine and feminine balance, it's up to us to balance out, okay, now how do I actually do that, right? And that comes from living from the heart and asking myself like the hard questions like, well, if I saw in this experience that I'm not happy, now I have to ask myself, why am I not happy? Which might bring up some very challenging truths, but what is more challenging, right? The temporary pain of potentially disappointing people in your life by setting boundaries that maybe you realize you didn't set, or waking up 10 years from that moment and realizing you still haven't done what you needed to do to create your own fulfillment and happiness in life. And as a result, maybe you please all the people around you, but did you even really please them because you weren't living into what was true for you, right? And you definitely weren't pleasing yourself, you know? And so again, every microcosm is an example of the macrocosm. And so when I looked at my mineral imbalances, what I love about your approach is that, and I talked about this a little bit on part 3, but now that I've had months to really set into this, what I love about you, right, is that you don't just look at things as even just like, hey, like not just the minerals themselves or the relationships, but what they lead to in terms of emotional state, mental state, and what they mean spiritually. Because again, when you go to a shaman and you're like, oh, my back hurts, right? They're not going to say, oh, well, why didn't you take Percocet? They're going to say, okay, well, let's do an ayahuasca ceremony and figure out where your spirit broke. Because that's the root, right? Something happened in your spirit. And then when they fix that, now mentally, emotionally, and physically, you're going to be much more easier, or it's going to be much easier to then have that healing trickle down. Because ideally, if you're not finding the root cause, then you're just attacking the symptoms all day. You know, it's like the car and the alignment issue. So 100% buying what you're selling, man. I mean, this is like, it's so obvious. And that's what it was, right? Like when I first heard you talk about this, I was like, fucking finally, right? Because I'll go to a PT. I'll go to an acupuncturist. I'll go to the mystery school. And they all speak about their different respective fields, right? PT speaks about physical. Acupuncture might talk about emotions, right? Or mental, or maybe even spiritual. Mystery school talks about spirit. And they're all like, this is what you need. But none of them are like, hey, why don't we look at everything? And that's why I love Paul's 4-doctor system. That's an example of someone who's aware that like, hey, listen, it's not just this one area, because how we do anything is how we do everything, right? So if our minerals are out of imbalance, it's not logically just that our minerals are out of balance. It's what does that mean about us emotionally, mentally, and spiritually as well.
Definitely. And, to wrap it up, I want to share a very important thing, and I'm sure a lot of people are aware of it, but just to have more emphasis on it is our environment. I spent years doing everything possibly for my own individual self, but not necessarily putting into consideration my environment. Of course, I live in heaven, one of the most beautiful areas in the world, Carmel by the Sea, right by Big Sur, mile from the beach, really clean house. My place is very organized. I have good water, good structuring, filtration system. And I had people come out before I first moved in to inspect my house for mold. Everything checked out A-okay, but really they didn't know what they're doing. But only to come to realize that I've been living in mold. And I didn't really do the proper testing. I really didn't do effective inspection, So it's important to really put into consideration that our environment, one, is not separate from us. We are our environment. It reflects us as we reflect it. And if we don't really address our environment, have it be water damaged building, house, vehicle, pets, thing with pets too. when you're treating someone for an infection, you have to really look at the spouse in the house. That's a very common saying, spouse and house. And if you don't, you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars doing all the right things, all the right supplements. Your dog can have candida, off-gassing it onto you when he's sleeping with you, or the carpet can have candida on it. Candida is just, another expression of mold, just like fungus is. And if you don't put into consideration these things, you're going to be playing tug of war. So that's why you got to zoom out. You zoom in, and then you zoom out. And that's one thing that I really love working with my clients on, not just the 4 doctors, but the 4 elements. And what are the 4 elements? The 4 key functions of the mind. And the soul uses these 4 key functions of the mind to create resistance so we can really understand what enlightenment and unconditional love God is. So we must learn how to effectively take action, fire, transformation. We must learn how to inwardly go into ourselves, self-introspection, water, earth. We must learn how to be grounded and not let other people's opinions sway ours. We must live in alignment with our truth, which is what works for you. And air, my favorite one. We have to see things from a bird's eye view and rise above. And when it comes to looking at root cause, we have to rise above and look at everything from a bird's eye view. The person, the environment, their work environment, their relationships, all these things, and not zoom in too much just on the person that's right in front of you. They're important to look at, but there's also so many other aspects and facets to put into consideration if you really want to get to the root cause. If you don't, then you don't have to. But if you do, like I'm sure most people do, you have to put into consideration all these other things I just mentioned. And if you don't, as I've learned myself, you're going to be playing tug of war. And you're going to be questioning that I'm not doing the right things. But you're doing the right things for yourself, but you're not doing the right things with your environment.
I mean, that is so obvious to me now. It wasn't always obvious, but it's so obvious to me now, and like I mentioned to you, one of the places that I frequent, I know has at least a little bit of black mold in the bathroom. And, it was one of those things where I always knew, like, being in health, I knew, but I was like, well, I'm only spending a couple minutes there. I logicked my way around it, and at the end of the day, like, logic is a great tool, but it's not the tool for that kind of job, And so, Jason, this has been amazing, man. I want to make sure I give you ample time to tell people where they can find you guys. I just want to sing Jason's praises. Like I'm telling you, this stuff is changing my life. And if you're interested in living a highly optimized life, you cannot, negation acknowledged, overlook minerals, right? Like it is something that I really feel is the sleeping giant or the really elephant in the room that really a lot of people are not aware of. So Jason, where can people find you? Where can they discover more about your services? Tell them everything.
Definitely. I would say the simplest way to probably get in touch with me is via email. And my email is jason@specializedhealthandexercise.com. So specializedhealthandexercise.com. And then on Instagram, J_Gandzuk, GANDZJUK.
Awesome, man. Dude, this has been a friggin' blast. I can't wait to have you back on for part 5. Every time I talk to Jason, guys, he's got some new level of understanding of either this or something that relates to it. And he is dedicated to making sure that first for himself and then therefore for the world around him, that he's continuing to ask questions and stay curious. And as you'll find with any good coach, guide, mentor, healer, teacher, etc., the thing that makes them the best is that they never settle. They never say, this is fine, I'll stop here, right? I mean, if you look at Paul CHEK, he's 61 and he's still constantly learning new stuff. That's someone who I would put my money on, right? And so guys, make sure if you're interested, if this resonates with you, reach out to Jason. I promise you will walk away feeling better than you've ever known you could feel. Like I stated in the intro, each and every time I chat with Jason, I am mesmerized at not only how much knowledge he has amassed, but also how articulate he is and how powerful he delivers his message so that anyone, regardless of prior experience in the subjects he discusses, can have a massive benefit in understanding and practical application of his teachings. For any of you looking to connect with Jason and begin working with him to get yourself feeling highly optimized, make sure to check out the show notes for this episode, where I will be diving into all of the easiest ways to find him today. Jason, thank you so much for coming back onto the show to update us all on all of the incredible knowledge you have gained since last being on, for always being such an inspirational and awesome friend in my life, and for doing the incredible work you are doing in the world to empower the world at large. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.